This is Voice to Culture, a podcast for the modern day confused citizen. Hey, I'm your podcast host, Helen.
I'm Callie.
I'm Michelle.
And I'm Carolyn.
Welcome back to another bonus episode. Today, we are interviewing a very special guest. She's a founder of San José Strong, a grassroots organization dedicated to reinventing San Jose for and by the community. She's also an engineering student at Harvey Mudd College, a musician, and an author. Please welcome Mary Celestin.
Yay!
Yay!
So yeah, how are you doing today, Mary? I know that was a really long intro, but if there's anything else that you would like to add or mention about yourself, you're more than welcome to do so.
Sure, yeah, that pretty much sums me up. I like to hang out with my family and friends and listen to music. I like jump roping and running. And I teach STEM to high school girls and elementary school girls a lot, so I like doing that. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Today's going all right so far. Gearing up for the semester to start on Monday, so trying to rest as much as I can.
Yeah, we think what you do is super cool because starting SJ Strong, you're using your resources to contribute back to the community, and I feel like a lot of people think oh, I can't do anything right now because of the pandemic. You've shown that's simply not true. And you've created a whole organization, SJ Strong. And we were wondering, because you could have chosen to help out any cause, you've chosen this one in particular. We were wondering why SJ Strong? What inspired you to found this organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was pretty serendipitous, to be super honest. I didn't start out saying, okay, I want to start San Jose Strong. This is what it's going to look like. Everything started when I made this guide to activism that I posted on my Instagram back in June. It was on that Blackout Tuesday. And it was San Jose, let's get to work. And I made that guide for several reasons. One, as you guys have mentioned, I'm an engineering student, and I'm really passionate about city development and city scaled innovation and smart cities, infrastructure, cool things like that. That also ties into my writing, anything world building, fantasy, sci-fi. I love all that kind of stuff. And I feel we as humans function really well on a city scale, being able to be connected with community, and we can handle problems where we can see them in real life. And so when all of the protests surrounding the murder of George Floyd were taking off, I was personally feeling just overwhelmed by the oversaturation of information. You hop on Twitter, on Instagram, and there's going to be a bazillion posts within 20 seconds of scrolling of just things going down all over the country. And, people talking about this way to get involved, this petition to sign, this thing that's happening, this tragic thing. And additionally, my family lives in downtown San Jose. So we live a block from City Hall. And so I participated in, / even if I wasn't participating, was seeing on my street all of the protests in downtown San Jose. And I was feeling really frustrated with how local media was covering the protests, because from my experience, it was just these this beautiful coming together of people in solidarity in support of Black Lives Matter. Local businesses were in support. Everybody was pretty down. The one business I knew, personally, that was vandalized, I reached out and was hey, do you need help cleaning things up? And they were oh, we've already cleaned everything out. And then they had a Black Lives Matter sign the next day. And so I was just seeing this overwhelming support downtown and a lot of beauty downtown. And it felt the local media was only covering a handful of really hectic instances that were happening downtown, and not paying attention to the fact that things really only got hectic when the police came. That was things would be chilling, and then the police would come and things would not be chilling. And so I made this guide, and it called on civil disobedience against the curfew. I was wherever you are in San Jose, go outside at 8 p.m. and say that you don't support the curfew. It called on, if you wanted to participate in the protest in City Hall, this is what I knew. I knew you could socially distance. There's plenty enough space. people tend to be protesting from 3 to 8. There was like food and medical supplies by what is now formed as Hero Tent, but originally was, just a group of awesome people coming together and supplying food and supplies. And, I was like, you want to support Black businesses? Here they are in San Jose. You want to support bail relief funds? Here they are in San Jose. You want to learn about the history of Black Americans? Like, read Dr. Atkin's book on African Americans of Santa Clara County, right? So I made this guide and was just centering all the conversations everyone was already having on Black Lives Matter, but just in San Jose. And like, people like loved it. Like, I didn't expect it to get as much traction as it did. Like, I didn't promote it or anything. And I had a good enough following of people already, but it just like really took off. And I started getting 50 to 100 DMs a day of people saying like, oh, like, how can I contribute to the community? Like, what, do you know this? Like, where's this protest? Where's this event? And I was like, wait a minute, like, there really isn't a central like platform or location for people to get like plugged into their community. And like, if people want to like support like the growth and the progress and the innovation and the community of San Jose, you're going to have a difficulty like finding, like, you're probably going to have to spend hours online finding some organizations that you maybe could get connected to. Like, it's not really easy to do that. And that ties into my feelings that, cities aren't really built like communities, or at least a lot of cities that I've been in. And so I was like, what if I made this platform? Like, and I was brainstorming with some of my high school friends, like, what could it be called? Like, I need to get this off my personal Instagram. Like, what could this be called? We're like, San Jose Strong. Yeah. And it was like 2 a.m., right? We like are gearing up and we're like launching this Instagram page. And then, I started a Discord server, like 200 people like hopped onto the Discord server to connect to each other. The connections they made started to form committees. I was like, wait, these committees are doing really cool things. This is kind of turning into an organization here. And then like within a few weeks, like things started to really, really come together and really spearhead. And I was like, okay, like San Jose Strong, this can be an organization, and this can tie into my goals for like city development and connection and building community. Because, if me as an engineer wants to say, okay, we have to rebuild a bunch of things because, climate change, sustainability, we have to really redesign a lot of this infrastructure. Like, what tools does the community need to say, this is how we want to get this done? Like, probably need to know like what's up with local government, like know what resources like are available, what organizations are available, like can be connected to their neighbors. Like, there's a member of San Jose Strong who lives in my apartment complex who's also a senior in college, and I like had never met her before this summer. Like, it's crazy to me. And so that's just like the origin story and inspiration of San Jose Strong. But yeah, that's my long-winded answer. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that was such a great answer. I feel like that answered like our next like 2 to 3 questions as well about everything about San Jose Strong. But yeah, I remember seeing your Instagram page back around like during the summer, as you said, when it was kind of like it just started. It was a little like platform, and then it just suddenly, I don't know how, but like it grew like so big to where it is today. And I was like, wow, like this is amazing, because you're constantly putting in the work to really integrate different parts of San Jose, and like especially like the local businesses and like other community organizations within our community that I had personally like never even heard about before. And then like you're seeing it now like all come together, like, wow, how is this not like already city sponsored and everything, right?
I feel like a lot of it too, for the structure of San Jose Strong, I have like a few points on this. I think a lot of it came from me being like, okay, I'm like being thrust into this environment where like I'm meeting all of these community groups, like all of these different people are following San Jose Strong, these different things are happening. And I'm thinking, okay, like, I'm participating in these city council meetings. A lot of it started around the budget, right? There's these conversations about defunding the police and, where could we reallocate those funds and how could we push that pressure? And then I was like, okay, wait a minute. Like, I'm pretty civically engaged, I feel like. I turned 18 just in time for the 2016 election. And so since then, I've voted in every election. I do my research to an ability of doing that right. But, you know, if you asked me before this summer, like, what does city council do? Like, what are all the local government positions? Like, who controls what? Like, I would have not had comments there. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm pretty highly educated. Like, I have enough time to know these things. Like, this is like, wow. Like, and then when I started to look into it, I was like, this, like, all these websites, they're all in different places. Like, the local government's kind of a mess and how they're organized. Like, this is like a hassle to even try to explore. Like, this is taking me hours just to find like basic information I want. And I was like, okay, like, what would it look like to have like a document where like you could just find all that information? And like similarly for a lot of the organizations, right? I was like getting super plugged in, and I was like, okay, like what if you just wanted to find different organizations and get to like filter through them? And so that's like where San Jose Strong started to build that digital component of being, you know, this platform where you can come to find the resources to get plugged in. And I was just thinking about that, like with my experience, whether that was my brief stint going abroad before COVID happened, right? Like to get like plugged into the community, like that just required me like, you know, I'm a musician, so like I'll just be like Googling like where are the open mics, like where can I participate? Like there isn't like a quick place for me to find all of that. Like the only, like if you go on to visit San Jose, you'll see mainstream stuff like San Jose Jazz Fest or like, you know, Christmas in the Park, but you won't get to really hear about some of the more like niche groups like Martha Street Art, which is like a few miles from like where my family lives and like completely up my alley. And like now I'm friends with Jessica, like the founder of Martha Street, and like so awesome, right? And I'm like, dang, like how did I not know this? Like I've lived in San Jose for so long. And so that's like a big part of the ethos of San Jose Strong is like creating that like digital archive database. I also think it's really cool how it started in the pandemic, because it allows for people who have strong ties to San Jose, but can't, like, you know, maybe you're a college student and you're not in San Jose for college, but you like love San Jose and you want to like give back to San Jose. You can be a part of a committee and like do cool research and do cool work and like create an event and like not have to be in person. And like same within like the movement too. Like I knew a lot of people wanted to go out and protest, but they couldn't because of COVID. Like an example, Beatrice, who's the team lead for our mentorship committee, the program I think is launching next week, which is really exciting. Like she like spearheaded that because she's, you know, has done lots of counseling and mentoring in her life. And she has like a 1-year-old kid, so she couldn't go out and like protest or participate in any community groups because like she has her family to consider when it comes about COVID. And so like being able to be a part of San Jose Strong and like create this remote virtual like mentoring program and like platform through San Jose Strong was like the way that she could like use her passion and her interest to like give back and like create something really awesome. And that's how like a lot of the committee started. I'd say another point about like building the networks, it definitely like took a lot of like engaging. Like there was points where I'd be messaging like upwards of 100 people in a day, like responding to DMs and like dealing with just like there's lots of stuff happening in people's lives and people reaching out through San Jose Strong to like get the word out or like to get advice or get input. And just like, you know, promoting San Jose Strong. Like when I shifted it from my page to the Instagram platform, what I did is we created this like little guide where it said like, screenshot this, like post it onto your page, and then like ask your followers to do the same. And then anyone who'd like reshared my like viral post, I like sent it to them. And I was like, please like follow San Jose Strong, like and share it. And I think that's how it was able to get a lot of that traction from the jump, was like kind of capitalizing on that like momentum that people had. And then in terms of like building the infrastructure itself, right? So like, I guess I've talked a little bit about like the ethos of the organization and then like the ethos of the networking. But then when it comes to like the ethos of the management style, I implement Scrum management. They tend to be used within like software and tech fields, as well as like marketing and sales fields. I was like introduced to Scrum because I've been like interning at this engineering firm. It's like a startup that does additive manufacturing in San Leandro. And so I was doing work with like the Scrum Master, and how Scrum works is that it's done on like a product basis where a team will meet and then you'll have like sprints, and they can be like 1 to 3 week long sprints where you have like a goal to get by the end of that sprint. And then if you don't meet that task, you come up with a new thing. And it's a good way to keep people engaged and keep momentum rolling. And it's often used in like startup environments a lot, and like in tech spaces where those deliverables are really quick. And so I actually was talking with my like Scrum Master at my job about like, okay, like I'm building this organization and I want some advice on like how to delegate and do distributed organizing. And so that's like how we kind of created, that's how I created like these team lead positions. So like when people like formed a committee on a topic that they were like passionate about, like we had like all this like documentation for like what does a team lead look like. And then team leads would check in like 1 to 2 weeks with me. And then each, like they'd have to meet with their committee twice a month, sometimes more, depending on like the time of the year or the committee and how it's structured. And they'd each meeting you have at least 1 to 3 action items. And that keeps like the committee engaged. It keeps the committee like involved and passionate on it. And so like for me, I knew that like the summer was such a unique moment where like people are home, like people are like just in stay-at-home orders, like it's the summer, it's like the pandemic, like people have more time than usual. And because our base is primarily high school, college teachers and like young parents, like that's like, we have other people too, right? But like that's the majority of our volunteer base. I knew in the fall when the semester started that like all the overhaul of the management infrastructure had to be built in order for it to be sustainable, for people to just focus on creating cool projects like the San Jose Fan Fest or our Queer Homecoming, or like, you know, name a cool project that like we've done or been a part of, and not have to worry as much about like, how do I recruit teams? Like, how do I outreach? Like, how do I create a social media guide? Like, building all those channels and building all that like structure. And like, you know, we have a folder like on how to run a committee, and it includes like how to facilitate a committee meeting, like how to like run your own like team retreat, like how to create your own action items. And then teams can upload more information to that drive so that the other teams can access it too. And it can, again, you know, building on that like archiveness. And so that was like a big rush too. So I think there's a lot of that back end that helped make San Jose Strong what it is, that you won't see that as much on a social media post being like, this is how we made a bazillion documents on this master Google Drive, right? You know, so, but those are things that like allowed it to be. So when people reach out, you can say, yes, go through this channel to this channel to that one. And then my final note is that I think people associate structure with like bureaucracy in a way where like, in order to have structure, you have to have like strict hierarchies, which is like not how San Jose Strong is run. And I've noticed that people have been a little bit shook by that. Like, it's this, oh yeah, you can just talk to me whenever, and I'm like the founder, or like anyone can like find their own team lead position. And like, we want it to be a symbiotic dynamic. Like if you want to build something on your resume, you want to build a new skill, like how can we work with you so that you can develop that, like you volunteering for us. It's like us kind of building that community base. And so I think that's also like an interesting thing, like San Jose Strong has a lot of structure and like a lot of documents and infrastructure, because that's like how I operate. But but it's also like pretty communal in that sense, where like there's a lot of mobility and a lot of room for like feedback and critique and commentary. So I think that's also like something that people find interesting when they join San Jose Strong. They're like, oh, this is pretty chill, but like also there's rules, but like it's chill though. But yeah, that was my continued spiel there.
Yeah, like just to quickly hop in, I was so surprised that like, even though, yeah, you're like the founder of San Jose Strong, you were very like approachable to reach out to. Like I remember like just DMing you like, hey, like, would you be down to do this interview? I know we like talked here and there, but like, yeah, it's just so it's just really reassuring to know that like even though we have like, you know, we have our rules and we have like our plans, like we don't have to be like super formal or anything. It's very much conversational and very much so collaborative.
Yeah, so aside from grassroots work, you're also really involved in like music, writing, and engineering. So what keeps you going and pursuing these incredibly different fields?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that question. I think for me, they don't feel like different fields. Because like for me, the thing that I'm super passionate about is world building. So like a really great example is when I was little. I guess like a quick synopsis. I was born in the Bay. I was born in Oakland, spent my toddler years in South Bay. Then I was in Austin, Texas for kindergarten. And then I spent 4 years in Northern Virginia and then a year and a half in Massachusetts. And then I was back in San Jose in 2011. So that's like a quick synopsis. But at 7, I moved to Virginia and I'm like a first grader. And I started telling my mom this story about like these 3 mermaids with powers. And they are fighting this mutant squid. And I'm just like, as a 7-year-old, rambling on about this story. And my mom's like, hey, you know, maybe you should spend like 30 minutes a day, just write down this story, right? Like write it down. And I like did that, you know. So like so if I pause, it's usually because I'm like, what's happening? So I'm writing this story and it ends up being Legend of the Mutant Squid, and it's like this little like picture book mini paragraph story I write. And like looking back, the story was really about this protagonist being new to this group and being kind to the people in the group to, you know, establish friendship and save the day. Like that's like the arc of this story. And in reality, it was me processing moving and being a new kid in a new school. And I was able to like process how I felt by creating this fantastical world of powers and mermaids and mutant squids. Like that's how I was like telling this like theme of kindness and friendship. This is how it worked out. And that's just like everything, like that's how I got interested in civil engineering, right? Like in this neighborhood at a Girl Scout meeting, like the head civil engineer came and gave a presentation about like his work. And I was like, oh, wow. So it's like, you know, I knew I was like good at math and science at that point. And I liked building things and coming up with cool things. But I was like, oh, so it's kind of like creating my own fantasy world in real life. And then I get to use science and math to like make it a reality. Like, okay, that's a natural extension of my love for writing. And then my dad's such a big music head, and I just like grew up like listening to lots of different music. Like I literally walk around with my headphones all the time. Like everybody associates them with me. And like I played the viola like throughout high school and did like San Jose Youth Symphony and stuff. And when I was a freshman in college, I took this Afro-Cuban drumming class. And the professor was like, hey, you know, you have a pretty nice voice. And I was like, that's cool. And I like made some music friends. And, you know, at this point, you know, I'm a writer. I write poetry. I've been writing like my books and stuff. And I was like, oh, so like songwriting wasn't super difficult for me to do because I was already like a writer, and it's really just poetry to music. And because I also have like a strong music background, they started to like intersect. And I was like, oh, I get to create like a world as a vibe. Like you can like listen to my music and like go to this like Mary Jessie's world. This is the vibe. Like this is where we are. And you know, you can start to see that all of my like hobbies and passions kind of just like stem from this. Like I like to create the space around me to be this certain like energy, this perspective. I can kind of break reality a bit. And that's just like how I get into all of my hobbies. That's like how I got into them. And like from that lens, I feel like they seem connected a lot. But yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, it's super cool that you could use like writing and like your other hobbies to like convey your emotions and creativity. So I think before you said you were like interested in sci-fi and fantasy, right? Do you also enjoy reading?
Yeah.
Like, do you have any personal favorite books and stuff?
Yes, I do. I do like reading a lot. My all-time favorite books. I love The Phantom Tollbooth. I love The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Those are like more children books, so those are like kind of like all-time favorites. Right now, I'm reading The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. And like, if you read the back of the book, it's a little jarring how like close to home it is. It says, when global climate change and economic crisis lead to social chaos in the early 2020s, California becomes full of dangers, from pervasive water shortage to masses of vagabonds who will do anything to live to see another day. 15-year-old Lauren lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, neighbors, sheltered from the surrounding anarchy. In a society where vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyperempathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Precocious and clear-eyed, Lauren must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her small community stubbornly ignores. But what begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more, the birth of a new faith and a startling vision of human destiny. And so this book has been pretty cool so far. It's also pretty exciting because the foreword is from like N.K. Jemisin. And so like right before I started reading this book, I like was reading a book by N.K. Jemisin, which was like a pretty fun like sci-fi, like fantasy book called The 100,000 Kingdoms. But it's cool because they're both like Black women authors. And I like read this book and was like, wow, this is how it influences my writing. And then I started reading this book and she was like, this is how Octavia Butler influenced me. And I was like, look at this train of influence. So that's my quick thing. Another thing that I'm reading right now is I'm Haitian American, and my friends gave me this like Haitian anthology that has like, yeah, it's just like a bunch of stuff about Haiti, and like Haiti's got some pretty cool history. You know, the only successful slave revolution. It's called Liberté. So it's like a Haitian anthology. I can like drop the names of everything in the chat too. But yeah, so those are some things I'm reading. I've been trying to get back into reading in the pandemic. Like I definitely like, this is the most I've been reading in a minute, but I'm glad because I could answer this question.
Yeah, the books look really, really good. I'm gonna like put them on my list. Really,
yeah, no, you definitely, I'm gonna drop it.
So we did a bit of research before this recording and found out that you were inspired to pursue engineering in 2010 because of the cholera pandemic. Would you mind divulging your thoughts on the COVID-19 pandemic rampant today? Did the pandemic impact like any of your decisions or like how you view people or what you believed in?
Yeah, one, that's so cool that you did research for interviewing me. But yeah, so like, if we're going kind of back to how I was like, oh, the civil engineer gave a presentation on like civil engineering to my Girl Scout troop, and I found it really cool. And so like that's like 2008, 2009. I don't know, one of those times. And then the earthquake hit Haiti in 2010, and was like, you know, devastating. And the thing about the cholera epidemic is it was brought by the Peace Corps, International Peace Corps brought cholera to Haiti, intent to help Haitians. And then the lack of sewage infrastructure essentially caused what like could have been prevented to have devastating impact and effect. And when you look at it, it's so interesting to think about how, you know, people will be like, billions of dollars have been poured into Haiti through international aid, yet Haiti remains the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And when you think about it, it's like, well, I mean, of course, Haiti's going to be in a situation when they're the only successful slave revolution in the world at a time when, you know, we still have slaves in the States, right? Like that's 1801, 1804. If I got that date wrong, I'm so sorry. It's like January 1st. But and you know, they have to pay taxes to the French, and you know, they've been like the U.S. has occupied Haiti like half a dozen times, and nobody talks about it. And there's just a continued effort of like oppressing the Haitian people, and I think that manifests itself in how international aid is handled. So I think Haiti has like the most like NGOs, like the most like nonprofits, like per capita, like in Asian communities. You should fact check me on that. But it's wild because like none of the NGOs work together. Most of the time they don't work with the Haitian government. And like additionally, it's a lot of just like us projecting like us, I don't know, like what Western society projecting their standards of approach onto the Haitian community when that's like not what would be most successful. Like an example within like sewage infrastructure is how to have the sewage infrastructure, like a centralized infrastructure, like New York City, would be half of the GDP that that Haiti has, and like would not be a sustainable approach. But what could be a really sustainable approach would be leaning on like one, a lot of the like independent autonomous like structures and how like Haiti is set up, like a lot of the communities. They're really big on autonomy, you know, because like, you know, not about slavery. So they're really against a lot of like the organized labor structures that just get like started that we just like take as usual. And like having like localized like sewage approaches that also like built in like with their like shadow, like there's a lot of people like it's kind of called like the shadow like society of sewage management, where like people will do it by hand, which is like not a well sought after job that people do, but like a necessary job. And like if there's ways to like integrate with those existing routes, but then come up with cool ways of using technology that like is available with the natural resources there, that like is done in connection with the community, then like there would, you know, maybe sewage would be better handled, and we wouldn't have had the cholera epidemic instead of having billions of dollars and hundreds of nonprofits and NGOs like coming in saying, this is what we're going to do. And like none of it actually is what the community needs, wants, or is sustainable given the culture, climate, and history of the country. And so that like, you know, you see that like in like structuring San Jose Strong, right? Because like the first like step, I guess, you know, the first step in like the scientific method in like coming up with a hypothesis is like doing the research to find out like what's the existing landscape in this hypothesis I have, and then you test it out. Then you see, did it work out or did it not work out? Okay, how do we improve from there? But you know, you got to start with a lot of research and understanding of the environment that you're working within. And so when that like comes to things like San Jose Strong, I'm like, oh yeah, like if you just have all the information available, then you can use that information to enact change, to test out certain hypotheses. Like if we ran this policy out, would this, you know, support the unhoused in San Jose? Is that like, would that, okay, like here, what do the community think, right? Like getting that feedback, and tying that into the pandemic here, I think it's really interesting to think about how different countries, societies, and cultures have approached and handled the pandemic. You know, whether the like, I think there's a lot of like social commentary on how America has handled the pandemic that's like rooted in our culture and a lot of our individualism that we tote around a lot, where it's like, you know, it's not affecting me. Like, you know, this like long spiel I just gave about like sewers and sewage. I was in this science technology society STS class. I butchered that. Like, I think it's a major. I apologize. I was in this class And it was about like water and sustainability. And our professor was from the Netherlands, and we were talking a lot about how you approach risk management. And so a lot of not the US countries approach risk management from a very proactive perspective of how do we look at the existing environment and actively like prepare for the worst case scenario and then build our infrastructure around it. Whereas we in the States tend to have a much more reactive approach where it's disaster strikes and then we build to fix the disaster. And we give resources to fix the disaster depending on how much, how much there's a liking to the demographic that was affected. New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina is a great example of not doing strong risk management, and we know why that is. But I think that ties into the pandemic pretty directly as well. When you just look at how we could have been prepared, and there's all these things that we find out that Trump knew it was bad in January. I know about you, but I was abroad and I didn't things didn't hit the fan for us until March. And you're we could there's so many things that we could have been doing. And also for leaders to be doing to in the way that they made it a state by state battle for resources, and just the way that we turned down lots of opportunities for progress. There's a lot of qualms with the administration, but I also think I listened to this podcast Hidden Brain a lot on NPR, and they were talking about how the pandemic is also pretty designed to not it's pretty designed to mess with how our brains function. We tend to go for things that if we see a threat, we are very visual with it. We have to see the impact, and part of part of having a pandemic where it's not there's 400,000 people dead, but we don't see them on the street showing us that this is serious. There's so many cues in our society that make it seem like things can be as normal when they 100% aren't and can't be, because we're fighting a pandemic. And so I think it's hard for people to wrap their minds around this more this long game of this is a devastating pandemic, and there's all these things are being impacted, and here's how you can take all these precautions even though you don't see it in your face. But yeah, so that's my answer. I said a lot of things, but again, as I keep saying, I hope it answers the question at hand.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, how we don't directly see it, I think it does feed into so many people's conspiracy theories that people make about COVID-19, which is so insane to me, because people have spent so much time and money and resources to research this pandemic and how we can move on from it, and yet people will come up with dumb conspiracies and be oh no, it's fake, this is not real, masks make it worse, all this craziness. And people are just so selfish, and they'll be oh, 400,000 people dead, I don't care, I'm still gonna have a party with 50 people. It's just so incredibly selfish, and the response here is so different than other countries. I think if we took different approaches, it would be so much better. For example, I think in Asian countries and Australia and whatnot, if someone does get COVID or something, the entire place would be shut down, and that doesn't happen here, so we're not directly seeing it. So yeah, I just thought it was a really good point that you brought up. And yeah, so talking about different experiences, I just think it's really cool that you have so many different experiences in different fields and whatnot. Personally, when I first was reading up about what you do, I was oh my god, she's so cool, because I think, or not just me, all of us, we have so many different interests in different fields. So me, I love music, and I songwriting and all of that too, but I'm also interested in the STEM field, and I what I want to do as career wise. I want to do something in biomed and engineering. and like it's kind of difficult at times because I'm like, how do I integrate everything? But seeing how you execute everything is like, okay, like I can do it too. It's not too terrible. And so yeah, so yep. Oh, and I saw that you like performed that in like New Zealand and stuff. Like, oh my God, I was like, that is so cool. And you have like so many experiences in like different places. So like going back to San Jose, um like what makes it so special, and where do you see San Jose in the next couple of years in the future?
Okay, first off, that's really cool. I'd love to like hear more about your music. If you want to like message me, or like I can message you, I'd be down to discuss. But also the New Zealand performance was super. That was I was studying abroad in New Zealand, and I was there for like 6 weeks, and then COVID happened. Which so I've also been like watching how New Zealand's been handling the pandemic, and like the friends I made in New Zealand. Like I'm like, wow. Like also how they handle like just like race in general is like the way that they like talk about like the indigenous like Maori people in New Zealand, and like a tone for that. Like I was like, wow, like if this not happen here. But yeah, that's I think that also is like an interesting. I want to make a quick side note before I talk about San Jose. Like the performance, like how that happened was, again, like I was like, oh, I want to like perform, but like I'm new to this city, so let me like spend a few hours like looking up where there might be open mics and like where I could like find it. And then like I found this like Irish pub, and I was like, hey, like could I just like do a 20-minute set for your open mic? And then I just like invited all the abroad students, and then like and it was really fun. And it sucks because I would have tried to make it like a monthly thing, but then COVID. But yeah, right. So like it's an example of like, yeah, like I had to like research and like find it to like find it. Like, so if you aren't like being proactive, like you wouldn't have found it. But yeah, I love San Jose. Back on track. I love San Jose. And I feel like part of how I came to really love San Jose, like my friends in college are like not surprised that I started San Jose Strong, because I'd be like, San Jose, 10th largest city in the country. It's bigger than SF. Y'all don't know. Like, just like we're part of the Bay. Don't talk poorly. And I think it's partly because like I've moved around like quite a bit, and like I spent like 6 years on like the East Coast, and I just felt like it was really cool that like how diverse San Jose is. Like wherever you go, like there isn't usually, there's some pocket neighborhoods, it depends, but like usually there isn't a majority. Like there won't just be one like demographic in like any place that you go. Like even though like there isn't like that many of Black people in San Jose, there's still like so much like just like diversity in the environment. And just also like I feel like it's so cool how like it's such a spread out city where you can kind of find all these different pockets where like you could go to like the mountains, or you could go to downtown, or like you're like a train stop from like the like Berkeley and like SF, so like you could go up there, or you could go to like Santa, like you're kind of in this like perfect, and like we're in the valley and the weather's so nice, and like just like I don't know, also just like being able to like establish ties, like and like kind of establish those roots. Like it's really cool, like whenever I'm like home in downtown, like if we get like food at the local restaurant, like I was like during Christmas, like we were picking up something and they're like, oh, say hi to your family for us, like, and then like I know the people who work at the different places, and then you see like, San Jose memes, and you're like, I know all those memes, like that's San Jose. Like I think it's really cool to like have a place to call home as someone who's like had moments where I didn't have that place. And so like compared to a lot of my friends, like I applied to 9 schools in California, and I only applied to 1 school out of state. Yeah, I was just like, I love California. I like love how it's like laid back. I mean, obviously it depends on where you are in California, but I like love how like the Bay Area is just more chill, and like, you know, like my parents grew up on the East Coast, and they also love like they love the Bay because you kind of like can be more of a person. Like you aren't like representing like an entire race, like in the way that like it sometimes feels like on the East Coast, and like just like the energy is just more chill. Plus like there's such cool music, and like there's such cool jazz. Like I love the jazz spots in downtown, and like, you know, I'm a big like hip hop R&B fan, you know, so then you listen to lots of hyphy music and like all the dances and like yeah, so I just like there's so much more I could talk about like San Jose, but like also I just feel like San Jose has so much potential. Like San Jose has been like a leader in a lot of like different fronts, but it also falls short in like so many fronts too. And so I'm like, wow, like, you know, we're like the center for tech innovation in the world. Like, how come like everyone in South Bay doesn't get to like, you know, benefit from that, or like talent isn't being pulled directly from San Jose like that? Like, yeah, like how can you, like, it's sort of like, oh, like there's so much potential for like empowerment in San Jose that like it's like, oh, like this is kind of like this like the soil is there for the seeds to grow. That was I had like another analogy, but I couldn't remember what it was. So we're just gonna roll with it. But yeah, so that's just a bit of me loving San Jose. And so, you know, even if I like go elsewhere, or like, and you know, I've been in SoCal for school, and like, you know, I'm still like, go to the, like, I want to like settle in the Bay. Like I want to, you know, explore, you know, maybe you travel and whatnot, but I like the idea of having roots in San Jose.
All right, that wraps up our interview with Mary. Thank you so much again for sharing your incredible story and insights with us.
And we really enjoyed having you as a guest. We'll link all her socials and other works in the description box down below.
If you're interested in what we do and want to better understand what we're about, please check out all of our socials. All ads are at Voice to Culture.
If you liked this episode, please give it a review or like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified every time we upload a video. We'll be back soon with another one, and please stay safe and healthy, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.